We've got the quick quitter, the one that
Yeah.
I'm just gone. But then you've
Yeah.
got the quiet quitter, and this has increased this year. So that used to be 61%, but that's gone up to 64% in the Gallup report. And the quiet quitter is the one that has emotionally checked out, and they're doing the bare minimal. But that is a time bomb, because if you miss that, not only are you missing the person, but you're missing the person that has the domino effect on, because they're the energy vampire within the group.
Contagious.
Everybody else is taking up their slack. And yeah, so definitely watch out for the quiet.
For the quiet quitter. Welcome to this week's episode of Connecting the Dots. I'm so happy to have Joanne Groves with me. Joanne started as an actress before finding her way into fitness. And over the last 30 years, she's worked every part of the gym floor and become one of the industry's master trainers, educators, and experts, and the person who challenges the myths and pseudoscience and challenges us not to repeat them. Today, she builds education for trainers and helps clubs across the world build their business. And she's the perfect person for today's conversation, because we're talking about burnout, and specifically how it's affecting the people trying to make us healthier, the health coaches, the personal trainers, and the group fitness professionals on the service side of the industry. We're going to define what burnout really is, why it's a workplace issue, and how to spot it in yourself and your team. And the uncomfortable truth, which is many coaches don't apply their own advice to themselves. And because naming the problem isn't enough, we're going to spend some time on what good really looks like for individuals running on empty and leaders trying to build a culture that prevents burnout in the first place. Welcome, Joanne.
Thank you very much for having me. And wow, what an introduction there. Just sort of to start with, to connect those dots, I think it all really started when I was a mouse in my very first dance performance. And I loved the experience of being on the stage. And at the end of the show, they couldn't get me off. I just wanted to stay. And that's kind of what I've done, really. But my dad actually had a sewing machine business. And I know that have much to do with actual burnout. But in actual fact, it is, because it's where it all started. I saw him running his own business with the support of my mum, and I saw the business grow. I saw the business fall apart, and I saw the business regrow. And one of the things he taught me back then was to always be curious and to keep asking questions. Sure. And so with that, I asked him how I could do anything but actually sell sewing machines.
Yeah. Yeah. How to be curious, how to persevere, and how to get clear on the direction that you want versus don't want. So, but put it together for us. So you had a stage experience that led you into acting, and then there was something that led you into fitness, and you really found a home in fitness, and you have great roots and a great network. How did you get as far as you've gotten?
From there, what my dad taught me was how to create a great experience, because he didn't really sell sewing machines. What he did was created a unique experience for someone who was interested in sewing. And I think that was at the bottom of me wanting to go on stage initially. And so I went through drama school, and I then needed to pay my bills. And in order to do that, I thought, what better way than to go and get a job in a gym? And luckily, I had a great manager, and I had a great experience. And I think this is going to be the through line on everything we talk about today, because a good experience brings you back and leaves you wanting more. It gives you an expectation of what you might get. And if the experience you receive is above and beyond that, you're like, yay, I want to come back. And that's whether it's in the workplace, whether it's at the theatre, going to an amazing film. I've just seen Odyssey. When the experiences start to fall down, what we actually get is a predictive error. We expected something to happen that made us feel good, or we went to go for that ice cream and we're like, yes, this is gorgeous, it's pink ice cream. And then you take one lick and some nasty person has switched it for pink salmon mousse. And the absolute change, you saw it in your face, was like, ooh, that's not what I expected. And so I think what I started to do was take that love and that curiosity and think, well, how can you deliver an experience that is consistent? How can you make sure that someone gets the experience that they want, whether that's in the gym, whether that's in a class, personal training experience, or at work? And I realized you need to be curious, because what you like at work might not be what Dave likes at work, or what I like at work, or what I need, what support we need, what resources we need. And so it was a journey of asking these questions and then following educational routes. And that gave me trust and a certainty in what I was doing. And then it all came crumbling down, because I realized that a lot of what I was certain about, I was either wrong, or I needed to let go of some of my old thought processes. And I was introduced to the first time into critical thinking. And I think that when we can go into critical thinking and keep asking better questions, we can then get a deeper understanding of experience, what people want, and how we can help support people. So that's been at the bottom of everything that I do. How can I create a better movement experience? How can I create a better environment for my team? How can I help a team in the NHS or GPs who are constantly under heavy stress loads and they don't have enough resources to support what they're needing to do, and constantly they're being firefighted by external demands. So I think that's really brought me into my sweet spot of now saying there is no such thing as a stupid question. Let's be curious and let's develop our communication skills and start to listen to what we're hearing. And from there, we can start to strategize and come around with some tips and ways of helping improve.
And all of this like mental framework is basically what you've built your fitness career on, right? Like, and then you just have a whole wonderful wealth of experience, because as I work in the fitness industry, it's a people business, right? So it's a living experiment. It's a behavior experiment. It's self-development experiment as you're learning how to work with yourself and work with people to help them improve on their health journey.
Absolutely. And I think I thought there was a specific answer. I thought there were 5 best.
Oh, you wanted one answer.
I wanted one answer. I think humans want this. These are the 3 things you're going to do, and then your life is going to be amazing all the time. And what I've learned to do is to get uncomfortable with not knowing the answers and enjoying that searching process. And it's not always easy, because if you were brought up in a school or a family life that praised you for outcomes, then you tend to strive that outcome, that praise for a finished product. Whereas if you've been in an environment where someone has allowed you to explore and praised you for that growth mindset, for coming up with the ideas, whether they worked or not, and then that's something as well that, in any area of life, if you can kind of go, okay, well, that didn't work, but what have I learned in this process? And how can I take that on to my next adventure?
Absolutely. As soon as you were talking about like simple answers and outcome based, I'm like, this is the fixed versus growth mindset difference. And, the growth mindset is a journey. It is being uncomfortable in the question and the unknown, and not expecting to have a buttoned up answer, because it's like there's a whole lot, there's many clues in the nuance. So we're talking about burnout today, and specifically how it's affecting health coaches, personal trainers, group fitness professionals, the service side of the industry. So let's start here. In your opinion, how prevalent is burnout amongst this group?
Okay, so with this one, it's a really difficult question. And there's how prevalent is it? And there's not clear data on the prevalence of burnout, particularly not in the fitness industry. What we do have clear information on and data on is how people become disengaged in their workplace. And this seems to be incredibly common with those kind of industries that are highly emotionally driven. So our care workers, first responders, NHS system, those types of people, and fitness industry comes into that because it's a real care industry. We have to listen to our clients, and we've got to come up with these problems. And we're also helping them in this very thing in their work life of how to live a healthier health span, if you like. And so it is prevalent, but I can't say how prevalent it is purely within the fitness industry.
And it's an opportunity, right? Like, this is a question we probably want to answer. So notice to anyone gathering information in the fitness sector, this is something that definitely needs to be measured because it's a silent erosion.
Absolutely. And then if we go back and we look at disengagement, this is where disengagement and burnout overlap, because what we notice, and there's the Gallup report of 2026 actually looks at disengagement, and it's got even worse since last year. So last year in 2025, workforce being disengaged, and we know that disengagement leads to burnout, it leads to physical, psychological issues, and we can attribute some of what leads to disengagement to things like having a lack of autonomy, a mismatch in expectations. So what I think is successful in my job role, my manager might not agree. So first of all, we have to know what that is. And that works all the way up the chain. And managers are also really suffering from this disengagement as well. So the autonomy, the mismatch, not feeling like there is an opportunity of growth within the workplace, and those things are really, really important, and they are something that we can help with. And the cost of this is being put down to $10 trillion in the US. So we're talking a lot of money there.
Understanding that there's no data, but your lived experience here is still a sort of data. Like, in what you see, what percentage, if you had to guess, of the service-facing workforce in fitness is disengaged and or burned out? And then we'll get into what each of those mean.
Okay. Well, I'm going to put a guess on about 1 in 4. On about 1 in 4.
Okay, 25%. Okay.
Yeah. And it shows up, seeing the group exercise instructor never turn up again, seeing the manager of the company just suddenly leave, just take absence. It seems as though it's really sudden quite often, but there are very clear signs. There are very clear signs that it's coming. And that's what I've started to notice. And this is where, if we do work on the experience and we do work on some key points, we can start to change it.
Sure. So what is burnout, and what is disengagement, and what is the overlap?
Okay. And that is a great question, because first of all, burnout is not a medical diagnosis, but there are some key factors that are really important about that. So according to the World Health Organization, it is considered an occupational phenomenon. And I'm just going to let that sink in, because that's massive. It is saying that it is influenced, not all the time, not 100% of the time, but most of the time from the workplace. Now, if someone's struggling with diabetes, it's not because of the workplace. But if this is directly linked to the workplace, that's an issue. And if it gets to the point of burnout, you're going to see severe cynicism. You're going to see someone who has completely lost all form of enthusiasm, and they're going to be completely inefficient around the workplace. And so they are the very clear things. But if we get to the point of burnout, that's too late. The horse has bolted. And at that point, you need to have a good triad within your workspace, and you need to get that person the medical help they need. And I'm going to stress this because it is a serious topic. And so I don't want to take this lightly at all. If you do think that somebody is at that point of burnout, please, please, please get them the right medical support. But what leads...
So it's not a medical condition, but it can lead to medical concerns.
It can lead to medical conditions, depression, and they show up in those early signs, the cynicism, lack of enthusiasm, and inefficiency. But you can be looking at things like depression and in the earlier stages. But interestingly, on the flip of that, there is one country that's different, and that's Sweden. In Sweden, it is a medical condition, but what they are diagnosing is extreme disengagement.
Okay. And that's the link with burnout and disengagement, because it's a breadcrumb trail.
It's a breadcrumb trail, absolutely. But obviously there, it means that if you are diagnosed, then you can get sick pay that is specifically to burnout. Whereas in most other countries, what's going to happen is if you do get burnout, you're going to get diagnosed with things like depression and other mental health issues, potentially chronic pain, and they will be what you're actually signed off work for.
And then the next logical question is, what contributes to it? So you said you've already said some of these things, but like lack of self-autonomy, a disconnect in expectations versus what I'm delivering. I'm sure a discouraging feedback loop is somewhere in here. What else?
Well, I think those things as well are quite huge, and
all of them,
they have a massive impact. They sound quite simple, and I think it's really important that we go, well, you know, if there is a mismatch, for example, that's a communication issue. And what I started to notice was a lot of the things around disengagement could be sorted out or improved by good communication skills. So I would say there's a lack of communication there. And what we can't take away is that we're all in lives that have other things going on. So, you know, we could be at work and it may not be affecting us for 3 years. But then suddenly we've maybe had a child, or maybe we've got a relationship breakdown, or maybe we've got a parent that now needs extra care. Maybe we're going through the climacteric period. But all these things are outside of work. But the way I like to think about it is we kind of have a bucket or even a cup. And in this cup, we're constantly filling it with things. And there are certain things we can't take out of this cup. You know, our relationship, the pressures outside of work. And then when we're adding the pressures inside of work, it could just be the simplest thing that fills that cup, and then all of a sudden the tea is overflowing, and that's when you start to experience these symptoms. So what is it exactly, and how does that link in? What we're really talking about is emotion. Now, all around us, we are constantly getting feedback. So while I'm talking to you, I've got the lights in front of me. I've also got the school to the side of me, and I can hear the noise of the school. I'm also thinking, I know that I'm going to go and see my mum tonight, and I've got this in the back of my mind. And the reason I'm saying this is because we've always got this stimulation that's going on all of the time. And then what happens is at some point, some piece of information becomes important. And if it becomes important enough, maybe something becomes too loud, maybe something becomes too hot, or you miss a deadline, whatever that thing is, at that point, the information crosses what we call a threshold. And once it crosses that threshold, you get a chemical reaction, you get a muscular contraction. And this is what we call an emotion. And that emotion is there from this trigger, from this important information to emote us to move. Because in life, we didn't move because we wanted to go to the gym. We moved because there was danger, and because there's food, there's an opportunity. And that's what makes us move, inspires us to move. So if this happens, you've got about, well, I mean, this is arguable, but 6 seconds. And from that moment that you get this moment from the trigger, this emotion hits, but now you need something
negative.
Not necessarily negative.
Okay.
But whatever it is, you've got this 6 seconds where cognition needs to take place. The central nervous system needs to assess this information, but that's context driven. And so that feeling is then reinforced. And then what happens is maybe it was a deadline and you got praise for working late, even though it wasn't great. Good. That's a good feeling. That was that starts to be a good feeling. But if that was no good, you know, it was a useless bit of information that you've done there, that is now reinforcing a freeze, fright, or flight. And your central nervous system is reinforcing that that feeling isn't great. And each feeling we have adds up. And those feelings become what we know as an experience. But the thing is that our body's really good at learning and it shortcuts. So where we have lots of opportunities to go, trigger, if you constantly have this feeling and you react to this feeling, either with positive, either with negative, your experience is being shaped. And that's similar if we're talking about chronic pain, if we're talking about anxiety, if we're talking about confidence levels. And what we need to be careful is the narrative, the experience isn't shortcutting that information loop. So we can retrain that, but it's these types of triggers that create these emotions that all sit underneath I have no autonomy, because it's what happened in that autonomy and what does it mean to you having, whether it's control or a say or being heard. That was the second one that Gallup talked about, was not feeling heard. You know, we've all been in a conversation where you've spoken and you come away and you've gone, they didn't listen to a word I said then.
Yeah, it's like I don't have the ability to make decisions and no one is listening to me. Probably it's not safe. Like the level of activities is not mentally stimulating enough. Either it's too hard or too easy. Where's the sweet spot? What I hear from you as you're explaining this, like especially with the cup analogy, is, you know, the cup is filled with emotions, and we have our life that's like all of the domains of our life that exist outside of work and inside of work, but there's already some capacity of the cup that's taken up by those areas of our life. And then if all of a sudden, like everything gets tuned to the negative or to the high stress, right? And sometimes it happens because life's, right? So all of a sudden it goes one way, that cup can fill up really quickly. And if there's not the ability to reset and create space in that cup again, then that's conditions for burnout and disengagement. Would that be a good?
Absolutely. But I think the good thing is that the stories we tell ourselves can help tip that balance. Because as you mentioned, whether it was positive or whether it was negative.
That's the influence you have.
That's the influence you have. It's also the influence that you can give to other people in your team.
So the other thing that makes me think about, I mean, we've been in this industry for a long time, and we've had great managers and we've had horrible managers, and they've had great managers and they've had horrible managers. So like there's a whole ecosystem of people who are involved here. But I feel like sometimes we forget that we're dealing with the whole person in a work environment, and that there needs to be space to allow for space in that cup. So I think that would be from a, I don't know, dialing up the empathy level. If you are in a leading position, if you're managing people, is to make sure that you're giving enough space for the whole person. You know, they're able to at least let you know where they are so that you can work with that.
I mean, absolutely. An example of that is there was a club that had a member of their team who was struggling with their shifts, and they were starting to become more disengaged and just signs of, you know, not showing up on time. They looked tired. Their posture had changed as they walked in. What we did is we got everybody into a room and said, just ask those questions. So again, be curious. What's going well at the moment? Where are the areas that you're, you know, finding difficult or challenging? And we might not be able to solve them, but from your perspective, what would be helpful? And through that, what we discovered is this particular member of the team had a child, small child, was a single parent, and was struggling with doing early shifts and late closes. Yeah. Now, most of us that have worked in a gym know that that's pretty much the job most of the time.
Yeah.
But what we did from that was go, is there a workaround?
Right.
And 3 of the team members went, do you know what? Actually, I don't mind earlies and I don't mind late. And if you're happy to come in for that middle part, And that was an absolute game changer. And it's just such a small thing. But that person before that hadn't felt that they could actually say it. They, some of us are brought up not to ask for help. And so sometimes we need to lead by example and ask people around us, hey, I need some help here. Is there anybody that can help me with this? Because by leading, then it opens that door up for somebody else. So that's just a simple way of building that curiosity and actually listening to it and making sure that happened. The worst thing that could have happened there, go, yeah, great, and then completely ignore it and not adapt the shifts.
So you've just talked about the situation where it could have gone wrong. Someone was on the path to disengagement, probably quitting or getting terminated because there was a problem they didn't think that they could fix. And it was a fear of asking for help. And there's probably some self-awareness gaps along the way. But what guardrails can you put in place as the employer to help facilitate this safety so that people can ask for what they need, so that we can stop the culture of burnout from starting?
I mean, I think that one of the benefits, if I go into a club or if I go into a different work environment and we get people from different areas. So whether, whether it's the cleaner, whether it is the front of house, whether it's the receptionist at a doctor's surgery, bring them all together because you want a representative from each part of your business. There, again, open up that curiosity. And the other thing you can do, which I found quite useful, if people, because you do go into environments where people don't feel safe.
Sure.
Then
so safety is a foundational element. Yeah.
100%. But if that isn't in place, you can't suddenly force it. So you have to build and earn trust.
Sure.
But what you can do very simply straight away is have a suggestion box that's anonymous so that those can then be read out. And obviously to build trust, if you get some suggestions in there, whether they're good or whether they're bad, acknowledge them and talk about what that could potentially bring. And if it isn't something that works, praise the fact that somebody's actually offered that up and explain why it may not work at this point in time for you.
Right. So create a channel to collect anonymous feedback and concerns. Praise what's been sent, even if you can't address it at the moment, with explanation about why, so that you're giving people context.
Absolutely.
So then all of a sudden there's a communication channel open to discover what could be wrong and create dialogue around solutions.
Absolutely. And I kind of call this the think tank. And again, as that builds and trust develops, then you can expand on that. And
sure,
autonomy, again, is huge. So if you can outsource projects, and if people feel like they're collaborating, then you're taking that curiosity, you're building that communication, and you're building that community of support. So someone doesn't feel isolated, they feel heard, they feel like they're not in this alone. And that's a great way. But I would say that looking at what those early signs are within your workspace, actually bring your team in to ask them to look out for these signs. Because case example, it was a trainer who was one of the trainers that's really good. The one that puts in the extra time, they go and do all their extra training, all of that sort of thing, a really good trainer. But suddenly she started to be late. That was a change. That wasn't normal. She suddenly started to forget appointments. Her skin didn't look quite the same. She came in looking exhausted. Her posture.
Signs of stress, change in behavior. It looks like she's not taking care of herself.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
And it's the point that that's the change, that as in we're noticing that difference. And I always say that, posture is something that we see straight away. It's about the way somebody holds themselves tells you everything, the way they walk in that room. And those signs were missed. And eventually, credit to her, she went to her manager and she said, I'm struggling. So it's physical and psychological. So the physical stress might be increased frozen shoulders, increased IBS symptoms, irritability with the rest of the team that's not normal, those types of, changes in behavior, as you say. And she actually told me that the point for her was when she'd get home from work and just cry before she could get out of the car and go into the house. And then she couldn't even get herself something to eat because she was so exhausted. And of course, then she would wake up at 2 a.m, lying there awake because the stress. And so she went to see her manager and she said, I'm done. I can't take any more clients. I'm at full capacity. This is okay. And good for him. He listened. For 3 weeks. And then after 3 weeks, he gave her the talk of, you're so good. And we've just got this one client and she's got chronic pain in her back and you are the perfect person. We don't really have anyone to ask. The emotional blackmail. And she struggled with boundaries at this point. So again, these are strategies we can learn. This is not working for me. We don't have to give a reason why. We don't have to justify our actions. We can put a safety boundary around the things that we do. But she struggled with that. So she took on this extra client. And you know where this is going.
Sure. Her cup was already full.
Her cup was full.
It flowed over and she got to the tipping point of not being able to take it anymore. And I guess she stopped.
She did.
Okay.
The thing is a couple of things. Had the manager said, do you know what? You're already full. Why don't we take away a few clients just for this month, see how you cope next month, and then we'll revisit it. He would. And
you tell me when you're ready, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
But instead, what happened, not only did she leave, and this comes into the cost, she didn't take, but her clients followed her.
Yeah.
And she was somebody that they'd invested in. So she was well trained. She was well, qualified. So her clients followed her. But that also means that the clients that would speak to their family members, the knock-on effect of that
is huge.
So the attrition is absolutely massive. And so we have, if you do have these kind of examples, it's a really good way of just taking that and actually discussing it and say, well, what would we do here? If this was our workspace and we saw these signs, what are the things that we could potentially do to help? Because there isn't a right answer.
Oh, there's many answers depending on the scenario. And you talk about two really important pieces, right? And it's like each of the roles have their own responsibility. I, as a manager, have a responsibility for my conduct and my team. And I, as a person, have my own responsibility in communicating my needs and my boundaries and like keeping that communication live. And they both have responsibility in continuing to contribute to the positive professional relationship, right? So it's a great bridge into the thing we talked about at the beginning, that coaches, like this wonderful personal trainer, was not living the advice she was probably coaching. Why does that happen? Like, we know better, but we know better. Why, and what can we do about it?
And this is the hard thing because, we have all the information that we need. It's not a lack of information.
It's not the information. No.
To start with that, it's not the lack of information. And you're absolutely right when you said that, managers, 100% of managers and, CEOs. I've worked with people that have worked for very big financial companies and they are not immune. And this is really important because if you've ever had, an eating disorder or a confidence crisis, or these things when your cup's full, they start to come back. So we have to be really careful. And why is it then that our industry, we don't do it? And yet we talk about, measure your sleep. We talk about measure this, measure that, or take a mental health day. But why don't we do it as fitness professionals? It's very difficult.
There's a whole group of us that are guilty of not living our advice. Right. But on the other hand, there are also many of us that do live our advice and do really model the advice. And this would also be an interesting thing to study, is, of those two groups, which one do you think you see the burnout in?
Yeah. And I think this is the difficult thing, because, so just to unpack that a little bit. Yeah. No, and I know you weren't blaming, but I wouldn't want anyone to mishear what we're saying.
Sure.
And I remember as a parent, someone saying to me, if you don't ever give yourself time out, your children will never know how to give themselves time out. Bringing that back into the workspace, and why as fitness professionals, I think it's hard as fitness professionals because we feel like we do need to be role models.
But the thing that you said is the pressure of being a role model when you're a coach, personal trainer, and group exercise instructor. I think that is, we don't talk about that very often. And how we apply, like, what is role model, that also, that external pressure is also very individual of what that definition is. But I think ugly underbelly of there is a lot of diet culture dysfunction. There's a whole lot of overtraining, the downstream effects you see in like disordered eating. There's a lot of coaches that come from backgrounds that have this. And I think the roots of all of those things are in this role model expectation, and that's self-applied. Because the people that we're working with, the general population that we're working with, often find that role model persona that we put on ourselves a little too intimidating, not accessible for the everyday person. So I wonder if that's something that we could look at as coaches in terms of our own programming. Like, let's take that off. That might be a toxic trait that's not actually serving us as healthy individuals, and is actually not serving how we connect with our clientele, because a lot of the things that we've done to get to our role model persona aren't healthy lifestyle, sustainable lifestyle things that we would recommend to everyday people. So I think like that was a really important clue to spotlight.
I mean, again, so much in that, and you're absolutely right. We have an industry that has an expectation on it, and our role models have often been confused with that toxic diet culture. We're fairly new as an industry. If we go back to Jane Fonda and Arnie, it was very aesthetics based. And even the information that we were teaching early on was either from dead people or people that were doing the sport, bodybuilding.
Right.
And that's not wellness.
No.
And, if somebody wants to do a bikini modeling competition and that's the experience they want to go through, that's fantastic for them. But is that health and wellness? Not really. When people say they want a six-pack, one of my first questions is, do you really?
And
do you really want to do all the things that you're going to need to do for a six-pack? And it seems to be that our industry has built itself around this aesthetics, around weight, but we made a lot of promises that were untrue. We made a lot of claims, and we created movement as a punishment or a way of getting a body shape. And that was based on very shaky ground, and an outcome based, but also on shaky ground. Sure. It wasn't based on what do you want to do? What movements would you like to do? But the other day, I heard a coach asking her class, what they wanted. And there was one person that said, I want my legs to not look so bulky. I want my abs to be showing. One person said they wanted something different on their neck. And I was so proud of this trainer because they said, can we take away the aesthetics and the what isn't my job? I'm not a surgeon. I don't spell fat reduce. Who wants to improve their tennis serve? Who wants to get faster? Who wants to make sure that if they slip on a pavement that they can recover and get back up again? And so it's going to be a long time before we unpick and get rid of that toxicity, because it's in social media. As women, by the time we get into our teenage years, let alone our 30s and then 40s, 50s, our changing bodies, We have been thrown so much toxic rubbish and lies of what we should look like, what makes us valuable, and all of those things. And so we need to speak up. And that's where the curiosity, bringing people together in a community, means that we can start to do that. And if we see that the conversations that we're having aren't supporting, which you beautifully said earlier, if it's not serving us, maybe time to let go of that story.
Sure.
You know, I want to let go of a personal trainer has to look a certain shape. But ironically, whether we're talking about changing the industry, removing toxicity, re-evaluating the stories that aren't serving us, it all comes down to communication. It comes down to being curious enough to find out what's working for us and what isn't.
And that's the crux of the self-care piece, right? Like if you're going to model good behaviors, you do need to spend some time, look at your definition of your expectations and your shoulds, make sure that they're yours and you haven't absorbed them from societal expectations or, God forbid, social media. And then, you know, once you have redefined what that looks like for you, answer the question, how are you going to do it? And that's your self-care strategy. And that's the thing that's going to prevent you from hitting a burnout wall in the things that you can control, right?
Absolutely. And another thing that hit me there when you said that is the language. And the language that we use will reinforce it. And sometimes I hear people talking to themselves. I'm like, would you talk to a friend like that? Please don't talk to my friend like that. You know, have that love and respect for yourself. And, you know, we could say we should do something, or we could say I could do something. And that small change will give us that permission. And I could do that today. And the other thing is, you talked about expectations. And I love the quote, I think it's happiness, success is achievement divided by expectation. And I'm not saying don't move your stars. Absolutely. Keep moving your stars to go for your dreams. But also be aware of if you're setting expectations that constantly put yourself down. You know, start with something realistic. You know, if you are a CEO of a company, who's another CEO that's very similar to you, that has similar values? And what are the things that they do really well that you admire? Bring that to the table. And as we start to build for ourselves, well, this is what I value. These are the things that are important to me. These are my boundaries, and I do not need to be ever unkind, but I need to respect my boundaries as I want to teach others in my team to respect their boundaries.
This is another thing, like just to dive into boundaries just for a second, because you talk a lot about, you know, awareness and communication. So awareness is like, I'm aware of myself. I'm aware of what's going on outside of me. Communication is, how am I communicating to myself as much as it is, how am I communicating to the outside world? Now, boundaries also has that mutual element. What are my boundaries? What are the boundaries of the, you know, of whoever I'm interacting with? But I think that if you haven't done a whole lot of work on awareness, you might not have set boundaries for yourself. Like that could be a gap. And of course, you may have very clear boundaries that you don't hold. That's another problem. But I think I'd start with, have you done the work of defining what your boundaries are?
I think if you look in at yourself and how you've reacted in the past in difficult situations, whether it's a meeting that's overrun, whether it's giving other people turns, and looking for examples where you might have not respected your own boundary, and then giving yourself permission to go, that's okay. What would my ideal role model have done in this scenario? And if you don't know, you know, get an expert in to help you out. And I think the other thing that
ask for help.
This whole journey has taught me is I don't have all the answers. But what I do know is that as soon as anybody has certainty, I'm now intrigued to dig deeper into the questions, because every bit of certainty seems to have an underpin of, but that depends. So how can we question it to be useful?
Yeah, absolutely.
And one of the things that is talked about a lot is communication, and we've mentioned it, and it's as though we all know how to do it. And as an actress, one of the things I learned learning my lines was that the good actress wasn't the one that was being able to speak. It was the one that was able to listen to the person in front of them. And when you truly listen, not just to what the other person was saying, but the emotion of the scene, the space, your contact with that person within the scene, you knew what that person needed to say. You knew where you wanted to move. You knew whether you wanted to move in to be more intimate or whether you wanted to move out, because every single movement you make is communication. And some of the things that we teach personal trainers and coaches is how to expand that ability to not just listen to words, but to see when somebody's changed their rhythm in speech, when they've changed the way they're sitting, where they've moved in towards that other person. Those types of things, because they're the first things that are going to change when someone heads towards burnout. If you notice yourself not having that same clarity with the words that you're saying, you might go, oh, maybe I just need a few moments. And I still do improv because it really helps me, because you have to be present and you have to just stop and think again and be in that moment.
I think that's a perfect bow on, about this, is just tying this off, is this, it's about being able to recognize what you influence and what influences you, and making sure that you're reflecting on that and staying aware and in the moment, so that you're constantly checked in. It's so important. And I think the example with acting and what you do on stage, it is a dance, right? I mean, essentially it's this interplay between two people, and that's life. And it's recognizing the self in yourself and the otherness of the other. We're equal parts individual and universal, right?
Absolutely. And that connection is always there, so it's a dance, but it's not like the to and fro of tennis.
Sure.
Although, you're still dancing and you're still in absolute service of each other. But what is that connection at all times?
As long as you're present, because if you check out, there's no more interaction, right? Because you've got one party that's not available. And I think that's the point, right? So like and that's one of the clues for yourself. Like if you're not present for these interactions anymore, it's a flag. And if you're watching someone who can't be engaged, that's a flag. It's time for action and figuring out a way to create safety to support this person before it goes too far in the wrong direction.
Absolutely. And what you said there as well, we didn't get onto this, but it really describes what we should be looking out for: the quiet quitter. We've got the quick quitter, the one that's, I'm just gone. But then you've got the quiet quitter, and this has increased this year. So that used to be 61%, but that's gone up to 64% in the Gallup report. And the quiet quitter is the one that has emotionally checked out, and they're doing the bare minimal. Whether it's because they're going, well, I'm going to retire soon, so I'll just sit here as long as I can unnoticed. But that is a time bomb, because if you miss that, not only are you missing the person, but you're missing the person that has the domino effect on, because they're the energy vampire within the group.
It's contagious. Everybody
else is taking up their slack. And so definitely watch out for the quiet.
For the quiet quitter.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for your wisdom and insight. And we have a traditional question at the end of every podcast, because we love to spotlight other women doing great work. So is there a woman or women in your network that you would like to shout out? Who is she, or who are they, and what do they do?
Well, that's the toughest question, don't you?
I know, it's the hard question.
It's so mean. It's so mean. So I've met so many wonderful women through the collective, which is what is absolutely great about it. Alison and I'm going to pronounce your surname wrong now. 𝗕𝗂𝗿𝗂𝗪. She's a wonderful lady and she's doing some marvelous stuff. She used to work with HFA, and so she is somebody to watch out for. 𝗕𝗵𝗲, who did a talk at 𝗕𝗵𝗲, brilliant. And I loved how she shared her experience and how that can help people to create boundaries around themselves and, you know, to use those strategies that we've talked about. And Jackie Lee, I've had a conversation with, and I'm lucky enough to meet up with her at Elevate. So, and it's fantastic that we can have these conversations in the collective, but then meet up in real life.
Real life. Yes.
It was nothing like meeting you actually at 𝗕𝗵𝗲 and being able to go, let's have a hug and have a walk
Let's
around.
have a hug in real life. I know. And I think we're going to get that at HFA in not too long, like a month and a half or so. So that's wonderful. We will include the shout outs in the show notes, also how to get in touch with Joanne to learn more about her work and your podcasts. So thank you so much. I've really enjoyed our conversation.
And now I'm like, and there's Alina Cooper, and there's just so many out. I'm just going to give.
This is how it goes. They pop up like mushrooms.
But a big thank you to yourself and to Rachel for all the work that you're doing, and for Dr. Lou, who I had the pleasure of meeting a couple of years ago. Again, all incredible women. And I do feel that everything that we've talked about today, if we do create these groups and we do get together, we can all help support each other. And that's when it comes together.
That's absolutely it. I'm going to mic drop on that one. Thank you, Joanne. Thanks for listening to Connecting the Dots. If today's conversation gave you something to think about, share it with someone who'd enjoy it too. You can find all of our episodes on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. And if you follow the show, leave a rating. It helps more people discover our work. Until next time, keep connecting the dots and keep building the future you want to see.